Hello, today we're going to be talking about the gerund. So there are actually two entries, right? The first one is the gerund, and then we're going to talk about the gerund and possessives with gerunds, right? I am going to be following first Birchfield's entry for the gerund, right? And there's going to be a lot of extra information. I think it is interesting, but possibly you will want to discard some of what I share with you. We start off discussing the gerund, page 328 from the New Fowler's Modern English Language. And he starts speaking, giving us a preliminary note about Sidney Greenbaum's introduction to English grammar, right? We're going to skip that, and we're also going to skip the gerundive, right, which is a Latin form which doesn't really exist in English, so it doesn't make any sense for us to discuss it, right? We are anyway going to have a look at, speaking of Greenbaum, a quote that I'm taking from A Comprehensive Grammar of the English Language, which is by Quirk, Greenbaum, Leach, and there's one missing. And they say, we do not find it useful to distinguish a gerund from a participle. This is usually a problem in English. Actually, the form we're talking about is what we call an ing form. And this is what we're going to start talking about, right? Is it a gerund? Is it a participle? Well, at one point in their book, A Comprehensive Grammar of English, which I strongly recommend, even though it's a bit dated, very thick book, it's not useful to distinguish between one and the other, right? It can be a very problematic. Oh, sorry. It can be a very problematic area, right? So a gerund would be, in this case, I prefer traveling alone. One more thing I want to say before we get started is that maybe what your grammar teachers say differs. What they say, is different from what we say here, what your grammar book says, from what Fowler or Birchfield say. Just don't worry, make sure that you follow your grammar teacher in your grammar class and this class, right? You say what we say in this class. Now, we start off with point number 2 then at the bottom of page 328, trying to tell the difference between a gerund and a participle, right? And of course, they are identical in form, right? Both have an ing, and that's why you will hear me say all the time the ing form, right? Because sometimes it's so difficult to tell them apart. So one example of the present participle is girls on bicycles, with gowns gowns that were billowing, right? I saw them guarding. That is also a participle. Then for a participial adjective, my mother and I sat and talked in a musing way. Remember that I always make reference to the participial adjective when we use the verb to be before it, like she is bewitching. This is not the present continuous, but rather the verb to be plus a participial adjective. That's really, really central in translation. I've seen more than one mistranslated text because the translator wasn't paying attention to the function of the word. And an example of a simple gerund, he says, they ruled out caning, hitting with a cane. He wraps this entry up by saying sometimes an ing form can be interpreted as either a gerund or a participial adjective. A flying machine is either a machine for flying, in that case it is a gerund, or a machine that flies, in that case it's a participial adjective. Honestly, we're not going to get into that. So for exam purposes, I don't want you to discuss this because I think this is mostly a grammar issue rather than a question of using English, right? The ing form is still there, right? Let me just say also that in these cases, rarely that is the case, right? When I see a sleeping bag, I know it's a bag for sleeping, a gerund, and when I see a sleeping policeman is a policeman that sleeps. Not really, right? It's a participial adjective, right? Do you know what that is? I wonder whether this is in the dictionary. Yes. A speed bump, a hump, right? Or just a raise area to make traffic go more slowly. All right. Now we are going to get into the topic of the gerund and the infinitive, which is a question of patterns, right? Whether an ing form follows a verb or a to infinitive, right? And Bertfield starts discussing the cases of aim at ensuring something, aim to attract something, and the fact that there seems to be no difference between them, right? And the same goes for the use of rather and begin, began rolling her head, begin to crepitate. There doesn't seem to be a huge difference. By the way, let me mention in passing that here he gives us quotes by Iris Murdoch and Anita Bruckner. I would say one or some of his, two of his favorite writers, right? He keeps quoting them. So maybe if you wish to go for rather standard and the kind of English that follows the rules, you should read Anita Bruckner and Iris Murdoch, maybe, right? Then he goes on to tell us that in those circumstances, however, we have no choice, right? So we cannot choose. He avoided marrying, he succeeded in persuading, you're left holding the baby. These choices for the ing form or the to infinitive are not optional, right? Also decided to do something, failed to take something, prefer not to do something, right? These are structures with which we cannot argue. To be frank, this is the topic of Unit 15, Section 1, right? In which we're going to see verbs like stop. And even if I don't show you what the dictionary says, I know you know that when I say he stopped to do something, he stopped something he was doing before and he started doing something else, right? And he stopped doing something means that he stopped the action that was in progress, right? And then what happens with start doing something and started to do something, the same as with begin, there doesn't seem to be a huge difference. I'm proud of doing something, proud to do something, proud of having won an award, to have won an award. You see, that doesn't seem to be a difference, right? Usually the infinitive seems to suggest the single action, and maybe the ing form seems to reinforce the continuity, the duration, right? But there are some cases, I'm sure you know, in which I remember doing something refers to the past, and the same happens with forget. I'll never forget meeting such and such a person, right? But remember to do something, don't forget to do something, has a future reference. And with regret, right? I regret leaving school. I regret something that happened in the past, right? Bitterly regretted ever having mentioned it in the past. And in this is one of the cases in which you can say, I regret leaving school or having left school. And it seems that leaving school refers to a more general aspect, and having left school seems to refer to the actual moment when this happened. But regret, we have the typical use with the to infinitive to announce something bad. I regret to inform you, right? That's a typical one. Then with the verb help, I think something interesting has happened, sorry.